Cover One, the draft podcast. Welcome on a Friday afternoon. I am pumped, man. We haven't spoke to each other in a couple of weeks via the Zoom meeting that we do every time we do the show, but we have been obviously texting back and forth and saying, hey, check out this guy, check out that guy. CP, Christian Page, my man, on the other side. How we doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing good. Just continuing to get closer to some playoff football as far as college football goes, the NFL, and of course getting closer to these college all-star games that we'll be digging into a little bit today.
Yeah, man, I'm super pumped to do today's show because it's a Senior Bowl edition of the show. We're not going to fully focus on that. We got a couple of quick hitters to get to, but the Senior Bowl, favorite time of the year outside of probably the NFL draft day itself, the weekend itself. And I'm just going to get it out of the way because I've been actually asked by quite a few colleagues already, are you going to the Senior Bowl? And I know you're going, but me, unfortunately, I'm not going to go this year. I don't know if Eric Turner is going to go. I don't know if anybody else is going to go, but I'm going to pass this year just simply because of COVID. Got a 10-year-old kid, got a wife, got, parents that are a little bit older, things like that. So I'm not going to go myself, plus my sister. There's just so many different things that I need to worry about that I don't want to put anybody at risk. And when it sounds like the Senior Bowl is going to be a little bit different this year, as far as like maybe some media limitations, not going to get a lot of access to the players maybe, and just, the whole experience is going to be different. And I don't want to be having that limited experience where it kind of feels like the trip was wasted, because it's not necessarily a cheap trip. You know what I mean? So it's, I don't know. It's one of those things. And if I can do something virtually where I can watch the practices and see some of those things, and if the all 22 does come out of practices like it has in the past, then that's really all I need. And I can go from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there'll be some kind of virtual participation. I mean, like you said in the past, even if, you were at practice and everything, of course, you see practice from a lens of end zone to end zone position groups broken down. So you can't get the full picture just watching that, hour and a half, 2 hour practice time window. So you do go back to the film room. They have all these kind of metrics and all types of, like you said, the all 22 angles. And so I'm sure those will be a little more public. I think if correct me if I'm wrong, they did have some sort of app last year where you could log in and get that information. So I'm hoping, that will still be accessible, maybe more accessible now, given the circumstances and the protocols. But like you said, I am planning on going down. I only live, 3.5 hours from Mobile, so I can just drive down there and hopefully, get enough coverage there, given the circumstances and everything like that. So hopefully it'll still be, a good time and get a lot of information there. But again, really don't know what it's going to be like until we get boots on the ground. So looking forward to it, even though it is going to be a little different, but still something, an event that we all look forward to every year.
For sure. And if you are somebody that you're listening to the podcast, you listen to every episode and you're like, well, I mean, if you guys aren't going to go or whatever, how am I going to be staying up to date? No, I mean, you still can, because like CP just said, he's going to go. So find him on Twitter @_Christian Page and smash that follow button, because he's going to keep you up to date during the entire event. He's going to post clips, especially with the offensive line and defensive line. And we'll get into those guys here momentarily on the Senior Bowl, but we did want to get to some quick hitters real fast. And I want to shift gears to it because I just want to get it out of the way. I'm sure some people are curious, knowing that I'm the Big Ten guy here on the podcast. What are my thoughts on Michigan and Ohio State being canceled, and Ohio State getting kind of the free pass to getting into the, I don't want to say the college football playoff, but the Big Ten championship game? And essentially, if they win this game, which they should because it's Northwestern, if they get in, they kind of get that free pass. What are my thoughts there? So I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I don't care, because nobody in this conference was going to beat Ohio State. Not a single team, not Michigan. Michigan State got trounced by them. It doesn't matter. Northwestern's going to get smoked, and it just doesn't matter. I don't, like, there's an article on ESPN, is Northwestern Big Ten title ready? It doesn't matter if they are. They're not beating Ohio State. Ohio State was and is, going into this season, one of the 5 best teams in the country. It's just what it is. With Justin Fields, yeah, he struggled a little bit against Indiana. It was a close call against Indiana a few weeks back. But at the end of the day, Ohio State, from top to bottom, is just better, from Chris Olave at wide receiver to Garrett Wilson, who has stepped up and played wonderful for them this year, and we'll talk about him next year, to Wyatt Davis on the offensive line, to Josh Myers, to who I think had COVID. He's coming back. Then you've got Master Teague in the backfield with Trey Sermon. And then defensively, I mean, where do you start? You've got it all over the place. Sean Wade. You've got Tough Borland at linebacker. They're so talented from top to bottom that it's one of those things. Like, Ohio State is one of the best teams in the country. I don't care that they get a free pass. I don't care that people bent the rules a little bit for them, because if it was your team, you wouldn't be complaining. If it was Michigan, Michigan fans would be all about it. They wouldn't care. They'd be rubbing it in the face of everybody in the country.
Yeah, do we really need to see Ohio State play Illinois and Michigan to determine if they're a good enough team to just get to the Big Ten championship? The playoff, that's a whole nother conversation. But to get to the Big Ten championship, no, we don't need to see that. Michigan's having one of their worst years in a long time, and it may cost Harbaugh his job. Illinois, they're getting better every week, but they're not going to be a team that has the talent to knock off an Ohio State. Like you said, coming into the season, I mean, people are picking Ohio State to be possibly the national champion. And so you're still looking at this like, what's changed since then? Nothing. Okay, they struggled a little bit against Indiana, but they were also up by 3 touchdowns at one point in that game. Indiana rallied back a little bit. And it was Justin Fields, probably, maybe not his worst game of his career, but he showed some, average play, average decision making. So from a draft analyst standpoint, we got what we wanted out of that Indiana game because he still rallied back and they were able to win and capitalize. But as far as resume wise, they got their signature win. Indiana's still in the top, they're number 5 or 6 right now in the playoff rankings. They lose their quarterback, but still look pretty impressive. They still beat Wisconsin last weekend. And so that was their signature win. Maybe that's not the foundation win you want to determine if this is a good or bad team with Ohio State, but we didn't need that. I mean, if Alabama played 5 games, do you think, fans across the country are like, well, they're not deserving enough to be in the SEC championship game? Absolutely not. They've determined they've sustained that success. Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, and probably Oklahoma in that same mix. They could play 2 games, and we would still know they're good enough to reach the championship game, whether that's the playoff or conference. So I'm with you. I don't see any issue here. 2020 is weird, so let's just make it even weirder. I don't think you can hold that against a team like Ohio State.
1,000%. And like, okay, if anybody wants to, like, I don't know, pound their fist on the table and say something, okay, maybe you say they've got an open week. Maybe they play a team like a BYU or something if BYU's looking for some competition. And I don't know. I don't even know how many games BYU's played. Maybe they're up and they've already played enough games this year and whatever. Or maybe they play Coastal Carolina. I really don't care at the end of the day. Whoever they're playing against, if it's not Clemson or Alabama, they've got a shot and they're probably going to win. And maybe it's Notre Dame too. Maybe that's, the other one that they struggle with a little bit. But again, I still think that they got a shot against them. Against Clemson and Alabama, I think I would take one of the other teams. But again, it's one of those things, man. Ohio State, like we said, was one of the best teams of the season going into it. And then, like you said, Indiana, I mean, even on our podcast, we talked about Indiana being that sleeper team. We've been rooting for them the entire season. So, like, for them to play Ohio State a little tough, it didn't surprise me at all. And for the sake of Justin Fields and the talk of the draft, yeah, he struggled a little bit, but he did have some bad bounces there. He had some bad drops, and they weren't playing in great weather. It was, I think, raining in that game. It was definitely cold, and I think 2 of his 3 interceptions were just bad bounces or a great, like, diving effort by an Indiana player. Like, one of them were by a defensive lineman who came up with the interception. So it's just one of those things, like, it is what it is. Justin Fields, his draft stock should not be determined simply off that Indiana game. Yeah, you can take some negatives from that game, but at the end of the day, quarterbacks are human. They're going to have bad days in the pros. It's just going to happen. So it is what it is. I hope Ohio State makes the playoff because for me as a fan, I want that conference to get as much money as they possibly can because, and that's the other thing. If you're a fan of a team, I don't care about rivalries and all that stuff. Put that stuff aside this year and simply focus on the longevity of your conference, the longevity of your programs. If your programs aren't making money, guess what? Some of your favorite sports are probably going to go goodbye. Probably not football, but some of those other sports are probably going to go away. So I think it's something along the lines, if Ohio State makes the college football playoff, they make, I could be wrong, but I think it's like somewhere around $6 or $7 million for the Big Ten. So yeah, give us the money, please. This is about making money right now. I don't, my team's got 4 losses. I don't care about what they do. I want money. That's what I want for my conference and everything else.
Yeah, especially in a year like this year where money
exactly.
is not disposable like it is in recent memories or in any memory of college football. So I'm with you. I mean, no matter how you want to dissect the conversation, I get it. There are some things that you could poke holes in, but I think there's enough saying like, hey, let's get Ohio State in a championship game and let's push them to the playoffs because, one, it looks better for our conference because, I mean, let's be honest, like you said, the Big Ten has not been great this year. I mean, you had a situation with Penn State where Journey Brown goes out, just a week or two before the season. Micah Parsons opted out and declared for the NFL draft. So Penn State was already going to be a lot different identity this year, and it shows. Michigan the same way. They didn't return that many players, but they were still expected to do something. They didn't do great. Michigan State breaking in a new coach. Wisconsin, they lost a handful of guys coming into the season. And I mean, no offense, but when you have teams like Northwestern and Indiana outside of Ohio State carrying the torch for your conference, it's probably not a good year, at least from an identity standpoint. So I'm with you. Whatever Ohio State can do to bring money to that conference and to their respective program, you got to get it done. So I think this is the appropriate decision by the Big Ten.
Well, and aside from all of that, I mean, there's like 14 teams in the Big Ten, and there's 14 teams in the Big Ten. 4 teams have a winning record. That's it. Ohio State, Indiana, Northwestern, and Iowa.
Iowa. Can't forget about Iowa.
Well, people in Iowa forget that they live in Iowa, so it's okay. No, I mean, and that's just what it is. So it is what it is. If you have a different opinion, find me on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft and tell me about it because honestly, I don't care. It is what it is. But that's that. A player we got to talk about before we get into Senior Bowl stuff. I want to ask you about him, especially being you're the SEC guy. You know them all. Devonta Smith, Alabama. This guy has been just on an absolute tear since, he's been all season, but really since Jalen Waddle got hurt and went down, he's just been, fantastic. 80 receptions, 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns, potentially a Heisman candidate. I guess I want to start there. Do you think Devonta Smith gets in the mix for a Heisman finalist spot?
Oh, absolutely. He should. I mean, you look at Kyle Trask, who's doing damage at Florida at quarterback, Mac Jones, Devonta Smith's quarterback at Alabama. But from just, a production standpoint and just dominating every single game against, whether high competition defense you have in the SEC this year, but the guy does not miss a beat. Mm-hmm. And just seeing him in this last game versus LSU, a lot of times, Devonta Smith, he's just the comfortable outlet for the quarterback. But this guy is making circus catches. He's, finding ways to get open downfield. Yes, to answer your question, yes, about the Heisman conversation, but getting a little more into, just his stock and his draft ability. The guy's incredible. And it's weird because I want to say he's kind of a jack of all trades, and I don't mean that as a negative because sometimes that can kind of come with a negative connotation. But, he just does a lot of things, and he may not have that one elite skill, which kind of defines jack of all trades, but he doesn't have a weakness really across the board. And I know some people are going to dock him because he's not this towering type wide receiver one. He's probably going to be – maybe he'll gain a little weight when the scouting process comes to be, but he's around 180 pounds right now. He's around 6 foot right now. He's probably going to run somewhere in the 4.5s. And he's not this crazy quick guy, but he's quick enough. You constantly see him with yards of separation on vertical routes, 9 routes down the field. So, he can kind of answer the call, at least from that agility as far as, doing that at the line of scrimmage. But again, I don't know if all teams will see him as their true wide receiver one. Maybe a guy like Jamar Chase or, Rashad Bateman may fill that role, but Smith is doing everything that he can to be the first wide receiver taken in this draft. And if a team wanted to take quote unquote a chance on him, I don't blame them one bit because again, he's doing everything possible to prove that he's worth that mark.
Well, and I totally get what you're saying too, from like a Bateman to a Chase type of thing. Like when you talk size, like height, weight type deal, certainly those guys carry that wide receiver one type of size where Smith doesn't. But I will say this, and this is my message to the National Football League, to the teams across the league, and to scouts, to evaluators, to whoever. Don't overthink this kid. I don't care about the size. I don't care about any of that, because especially if you're a team, this is the message for the teams out there. If you look at this guy and you know he will make a difference for your team in the first round, you draft him, because I think he's going to go in the first round unless something catastrophic happens. But he goes in the first round. Don't let him fall to the Kansas City Chiefs, because him with Tyreek Hill, with Travis Kelce in the middle of the field, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of the backfield is an absolutely just you're shooting yourself in the foot for at least the next 5 years. So don't do that if you're a team in the league. Make sure you get him for the simple fact that the Chiefs don't get him, and don't accept any trade offers from the Chiefs, because they're he would be so fun to watch in that offense. Any receiver would be. I mean, Kadarius Toney, Rondale Moore, I could go on, and it doesn't even matter. It could be Nico Collins. It doesn't matter who it is. They're fun to watch in that offense, but Devonta Smith in that offense would be a cheat code. But so with that, and I agree with your entire assessment on him. Do you have an ideal range for him? Because I mean, like you said, he could potentially be the first receiver. I mean, it's very possible. Henry Ruggs went first, and there's a case that you could make that I don't know if a team in the top 5 would take a player like Devonta Smith, but I top 15, top 12 seems pretty ideal.
Oh, absolutely. And I think and you kind of hit the head on it there with Ruggs. When you see a wide receiver, or when the first wide receiver comes off the board, it seems like you can pinpoint that primary skill of why they went number one. Ruggs was obviously, running in the 4.2s, and maybe it was somebody, Julio kind of did it all, but maybe just his physical prowess got him up there. And with Smith, again, he just has a lot of cards on the table, and he's good at all of them. And I think that's maybe the situation some are looking at. But I think as far as projection goes, I would say probably in that 8 to 15 range. I don't see him really getting out of the top 15, top 16, because he still could fill a role right now as a wide receiver 2, and then work his way up to be that primary receiver in an offense. So I think his projection is going to be right there, because, you're still looking at injury stuff as far as Jalen Waddle goes. Rondale Moore has some weird, hamstring issues, and he's never really been the same after. Rashad Bateman looks okay, but Minnesota in that offense had struggles kind of getting him involved this year, and maybe that was more Tanner Morgan and PJ Fleck's offense. But Rashad Bateman, maybe there was some issues that people will draw from the early portions of this season. And Jamar Chase opted out the whole year, even though he put up quality film in his 2 years at LSU. So Smith, again, he's kind of in that range of being that wide receiver 1, but where is that? I think he's probably going to be the second or third guy taken, at least right now. But you can definitely still be that and be a top 10 pick.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, and since we're talking about Bateman, we've dropped his name a couple of times. I love him. I think he's a great player. I would definitely draft him. I could see Detroit taking him at 12, just simply because, let's say they don't get Kenny Golladay back, they don't re-sign him. I think that'd be kind of just an ideal replacement. I think he's very comparable to a player like Kenny Golladay. But I think Bateman, realistically, I could see his range being for Bateman. I could see it being 22 all the way to 29. I could see Miami at 22 if they don't take one at 9, because they're slotted to pick 9th right now because of Houston's pick. I could see possibly Tennessee if they don't get Corey Davis back. The Jets possibly at 25, Cleveland at 27, Buffalo at 28, Green Bay at 29. I think that's where that happens, just simply because I don't think he's going to test off the charts, where Smith, I think, will. If Waddle goes, I think you got Waddle, and then obviously Jamar Chase. So I think Bateman kind of becomes that odd guy out. And for the sake of Smith, they showed the graphic last night, and I thought about it when you were talking about it. New England at 15. I know they got other needs, but New England at 15, the needs of just needing a receiver, they can't draft them to save their life, but they don't draft them in the first round. Maybe they roll the dice this year and get themselves one with Jacoby Myers and then him. that'd be, I think, a fun little combination. And I don't know if Cam's going to be that quarterback, but with the run game that they have, and then two receivers like that, you got Myers a little bit underneath doing things, and then you got Smith just being able to kind of do everything, I think would be a really good spot for him. But you're probably right in that, I don't know, 9 to 8 to 15 range is pretty ideal for Devonta Smith.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think you could, we can sit here and talk about scheme fits and what team he may fit in a little more comfortably. But let's be honest, like we said, he's a receiver that can do everything. He will fit in any offense out there. And I think teams, like you said, stay true to your board, don't overthink it, and get you a quality player with a high floor.
Yeah, well, speaking of boards, let's get into it. The Senior Bowl accepted invites board. You guys can go to seniorbowl.com, hit the game. There's a little tab there. Click that, and then go to accepted invites, and you'll see all the players that have accepted an invite. And I got to say, it's always like this. Obviously, you get guys eventually that will decline, like back out of their invites and stuff. It just always happens every year. But this group of guys, ew, man, I know the quarterbacks might not be necessarily fantastic. I like the quarterbacks that go into this, and everybody, I just say the quarterbacks now because like that's the first thing everybody jumps to. But from the skilled position guys to the players in the trenches, especially, boy, oh boy, what a week that's going to be in Mobile, Alabama. I don't know where you want to start here. We can go all the way down the line. We can go right in the trenches. We can go wherever you want. You tell me where you want to go here. What first player that pops out to you?
Well, it's the first player written down, and it'll kind of piggyback of the wide receiver group that we're talking about. But and then we can put a bow on that position and get into the fun part in the trenches, like you said. But Shi Smith, South Carolina wide receiver, he's going to get lost in these group of wide receivers. Maybe not in Mobile, but generally speaking about the 2020 draft class. And I think he's put up a lot of really good film. And the weird thing about his game, he plays big, but he doesn't really play small. And why I mean that is because he's 5'10", 190 pounds. And he plays kind of that bigger, like my ball type mentality, that physical, like I'm going to box you out and I'm going to play physical at the line of scrimmage in the deep parts of the field. But he doesn't necessarily have that quick twitch or that overwhelming agility that you're going to see at guys at that sub 6 foot criteria. And so it is a little weird. I don't know where you put him as far as projection goes, as far as role, not necessarily where he's going to get picked, but as far as role, because I think you could sit him in the slot, but again, he's not going to slice and dice you in the intermediate areas of the field. So that's why I think I love guys like this. You're talking about the quarterbacks. They may not be overwhelming, like, juicy as far as attention goes, but I love it because the quarterbacks picked in this group really need the Senior Bowl because there's a lot of inconsistencies there, some issues that we think might be able to be capitalized when you're seeing them work with an NFL coaching staff the week. I think a guy like Shi Smith can take on that same role as far as the wide receiver group, see how he can sit there and disengage from those one-on-one man coverage situations. That is one of my favorite reps. Any one-on-one reps in the Senior Bowl is definitely ones you really need to pay attention to, but seeing how he disengages from that press coverage and seeing him win over the intermediate areas of the field. Because again, I don't see him as this quick-footed, big-time agility guy that you would see in a guy a lot of times listed at 5'10", 190. So he's one guy that definitely intrigues me just looking over this list.
Yeah, and it's funny too. He plays a lot bigger than that 5'10", 190. It's
Absolutely.
just it's crazy, and it's just one of those things where you see him, and like you said, he might not win a foot race, but he could very well be one of the more technical receivers down there, and without question, he's going to go up, climb the ladder, and get it and win at the catch point almost every single time. I mean, he's got 175 receptions for his career. Pretty damn impressive when Brian Edwards was there, being the productive guy that he was. And Shi Smith, I think, was kind of forgotten about, and I think people are still kind of forgetting about him. So I'm with you there, especially for the wide receivers. And then, I mean, obviously I have to talk about two guys, Kadarius Toney from Florida, Amari Rogers from Clemson. I've been talking about Rogers since the summer. And then we all know about Kadarius Toney. I mean, this guy, you put the ball in his hands and he's a playmaker. And it makes me wonder, when you see a guy like this, some people say he's going to go in the second day of the draft, which I can understand. But like, when you know that this guy's going to make plays, why the hell aren't you taking him in the first round? Like, if you're the Green Bay Packers, why aren't you taking him at 29th overall when you know probably on your second turn of the draft he's not going to be there? Like, take this guy because he's going to be a difference maker for your offense. Like, yeah, you got Devontae Adams, but not, and especially with a player like Kadarius Toney, you draft him in the first round, you kind of get that fifth-year option. So it's like, why not take a guy like that, regardless of size and everything else? He's so fun to watch. You know he's going to test well, and maybe it is character stuff. I don't know how it's going to shape out with that stuff. Maybe that's why some guys don't go. But like, you see certain players just not go in the first round, and you see how good they are, and they're like, and you're just like, what? Like, I don't get it sometimes. But like Toney, I see stuff all the time right now where he's like projected like 78th overall, 104th overall. And I'm like, what tape are you guys watching? Because you put this guy in the slot, in motion, wherever, kick return, punt return. He's got a shot to take it to the end zone every single time. And he might not do it every time, but I'm willing to roll the dice. And if I'm in the first round and I got a pretty good team, I'm going to take a shot with this guy. Why wouldn't I?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think Mobile will only solidify his top 50 projection and potentially his top 50 status as far as talent goes. And sometimes those can go hand in hand. But like you said, I mean, you literally get the ball in his hands, really anybody on that Florida offense, let's be honest, and you just don't know what's going to happen. And he could, and he's never going to have really any negative plays, but he is that Swiss Army knife to a certain degree where you just get the ball in his hands. It's almost like, in high school, coaches like know who their best player is. It's like, we're going to run everything through this guy. Just get the ball in his hands and just let him go to work. It's kind of how they can do things at Florida with Kadarius Toney, and how they may do some things in the NFL like that. Get the ball in his hands and just let him exploit defenses. I'm with you. If they're a threat to score a touchdown anytime they touch the ball, why are you waiting so long? And two, that's why I love the back end. I'll try not to go too far down a rabbit hole before you miss your next point. That's why I love the back end of those of the first round, maybe those last 8 to 10 picks, because they have to evaluate and be like, well, if we don't believe that this guy's going to be around our next pick, so let's say 30, possibly even 40 picks down the way, they have to take a shot at him. And maybe that's that's how you can kind of justify some of those maybe quote unquote reaches at the back end of the first round. But you have to evaluate and be like, well, these teams are already pretty solid. Obviously, they're picking that far down the draft in the first round. So they're playoff teams. They're probably perennial playoff teams as well. So they probably just need a player or two. And if they believe a guy like Kadarius Toney may not last till past pick 50, then you take them with the 25th overall pick or the 22nd overall pick. So there's so much justification with your point talking about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's just, it's like, yeah, I'm with you. It's the 8 to 10 pick range that you just get into. And it's like, man, it's so fun to watch, but, especially the back end there, but moving over from the wide receiver spot to the cornerback spot, the guys that are matching up against those receivers, I got a defensive back that I think is going to have a pretty good week. And I think that's going to be Vincent Jr. from LSU. I think as a nickel guy, you could plug and play this guy on a ton of nickel packages from day one. Now, he's probably not going to go top 50. He's probably going to go in that, 60 to 100 range, somewhere in there. But that day 2 pick, and he might even go a little later if he doesn't test great. I don't know. But I think this has got just a good hands. I like the ball skills. I like the overall quickness, the footwork. And I think there's just a lot to work with a guy like this. And in today's passing offenses everywhere, Vincent's a guy that I think could really show out, especially against some of these receivers. He's got a shot in Mobile to really showcase his ability. Probably out of the corners on the list, one of my favorite ones on the list. I mean, the Georgia guys for sure, DJ Daniel and stuff, but maybe Ambry Thomas from Michigan, Thomas Grant. I don't know. I guess maybe I like some of these guys a little bit more than I thought, but it's going to be fun to see him against Elijah Molden. You know what I mean? Like, Molden's one of the best nickel corners in the country, if not the best one. So it'll be fun to see how those guys match up in drills.
And I think just talking about defensive backs as a whole, it's really interesting to see their complete ability in places like the Senior Bowl, because there's sometimes where we've seen pretty decent corners come into Mobile and they're lining up as like more like free safeties in practice drills, and they're doing a good job. And I think that's when you can really see guys flourish in certain situations or expose some of their weaknesses, but their weaknesses are exposed. So then it's like, well, maybe I'm going to practice a whole week and a nickel roll instead of being that island cornerback that I was at my school. But given situation, I'm going to be better here. I remember Eric Turner talking about Michael Ojemudia from Iowa, how we viewed him as maybe more of that man corner at Iowa, but he was kind of getting exposed in this Senior Bowl. He played a little zone and off coverage, and we saw some of his weakness exposed in those man-on situations. He's having a great year right now for Denver as a rookie and in a certain situation. So it's not surprising to see somebody maybe struggle in one area or really do well in one area, and then the Senior Bowl may exploit or accentuate some of their good skills, and then that could be what they project at the next level. So I think defensive back definitely, because it's so versatile, especially in today's defenses where your nickel could also be an outside guy, or your free safety could come down and, have to fulfill a man role, or sometimes even play in the box. We've seen that happen quite often as well. So I think defensive backs, and I don't know how much you can necessarily judge it in a full week of practice, the Senior Bowl, but you definitely see them moving around. And it's really fun to see, some of those skills kind of come out of these guys and how they may project at the next level.
For sure. And I think it's just a fun, competitive group. And when you get some of these receivers that it's a pretty good group of receivers there already. I'm sure we'll see a couple more, especially in the coming days. I haven't checked their Twitter page today, but I'm sure they've already announced more to the list. I'm just looking at their site. And like Thomas Graham is forgotten about right now. He opted out this year, hasn't played for Oregon. He's going to go. He's going to have a pretty good week. Like I think that guy's got pretty solid tape as well. So, and I'm normally not a defensive back guy, but I watch some of these guys going into the year and everything else, and I kind of jumped the gun on defensive backs this year for some odd reason. And I'm glad I did, because I'm excited to potentially watch these guys in depth if I can get some tape on it. But regardless, I'm excited for the people going to the event to watch it as well. But moving into the trenches, our favorite group, because I think this is probably the group that's going to take the longest, and we could probably close it after this, but I'll let you start. I know one of your boys on the defensive side is there. You can go whatever direction you want in the trenches here.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about Mark Wilson. The crowd is tired of his name on here. I've probably been doing it for 2 years now, but he has some decent competition he's going to be matching up against. Hopefully he's healthy enough and he can kind of show, what he's really made of, because, heck, my job may rely on him being successful or not. So we'll see about that. But starting in the trenches on the offensive line, I got two offensive tackles that catch my eye, one being Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State. I love watching this dude play. He plays with a little bit of a nasty demeanor, really strong at the point of attack, and he's strong throughout his whole body. It's not just his upper body strength, but he keeps that consistent leg drive, shows really, that lower body strength to really flatten and just maul people in the run game, and he has a lot of weight in his hands that carry over the pass protection as well. Sometimes he may not be 100%, always calm in pass protection. I still think he's fine there, but he has the strength in his hands. He has the extension to kind of supplement some of those inconsistencies in his lower half. So I really love watching this guy play. I believe he just opted out because he had an injury versus, I think it was Oklahoma, and so there's a little bit of scare there. So he's opted out the rest of the season to prepare for the NFL draft and to get down to Mobile. And real quick, another guy, and I'll let you hit it home, Liam Eichenberg, the Notre Dame offensive tackle. I think this guy's had a really good season. You saw him struggle a little bit early in the game versus Clemson, but you saw him get better throughout the game. And I love seeing improvement, whether it's season improvement, career improvement, or even in-game improvement. I really love to watch that. I call him Liam Stonewall Eichenberg because that's just who he is. You cannot get by this guy. He's not this plush athlete, but he has – tremendous hand usage. He has a lot of weight and really good body leverage throughout. So I really love watching him play, and I think he's had a really solid year. And this tackle class, it might be splitting hairs this year. And I think those two guys are definitely not in the mix as far as maybe the top 3 to 4 guys go, but with a really good week in Mobile, you never know. That's when the chatter maybe begins or starts to come to fruition of where these guys may go. But those are two guys that I really like the upside, and I see a lot of starting ability in these guys day one.
I haven't watched Jenkins yet, but I am excited for Eichenberg. Another one, Dylan Ray-Duns. I don't need to go into that. I've spent way too much time probably this year talking about him, but I think he's got first-round potential, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he went in the first round. But I'm going to go inside here. I'm going to go to guard, and I got a couple of guys. Robert Hainsey, Notre Dame, I think he's versatile. I think he's just got to figure it out a little bit with some NFL coaching, and he's probably a day 3 pick. But if he has a good week, I think he solidifies that status, and then I think if he can get to the right spot, I truly think you could plug this guy in at left guard, right guard, and be okay. And teams like the Packers, teams like the Giants, if they need some help with the interior parts of their offensive line, Hainsey makes a ton of sense. And I think any team really looking for offensive line help would make a smart gamble by taking a shot at him. And then the other two are the Alabama guys. And I just want to talk about this group as a whole, because what a group it is for the Crimson Tide. I mean, it's always a fun group with them and what they have, but this year is like the Crimson Tide, that offensive line, it's some of the fastest moving linemen I think I've ever seen on an offensive front. And I'll start at the top. Probably my favorite player for them up front, and I'm not going the Senior Bowl route yet, but Alex Leatherwood, their left tackle. I think you can plug him inside. You can play him at left tackle, right tackle, anywhere. I think this guy's probably a day 2 pick, and he might even go in the first round. I mean, if Isaiah Wilson can go in the first round, I think Alex Leatherwood could. I think he truly is that good. I think he's going to test pretty well. Then just to the Senior Bowl part, Landon Dickerson, he might have jumped Creed Humphrey as the best center in this class. He really, like, I was watching him last night, and I put a play out there on Twitter. He snaps a ball, he chips upfield, and he gets the second level. He's patient, he's square, he gets his hands under the shoulder pads in the armpits of the linebacker. He rolls his hips on the contact and then directs the linebacker away from the hole. It was a perfect rep for climbing to the second level. And
sorry to elaborate, Dickerson is a coaching clinic when you turn on his film.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's fantastic. Like, he might end up on my board. And I know I mentioned like Alex Leatherwood, I like him a lot, but Dickerson's up there as well. And Dickerson might even get like a top, I don't know, probably a top 30 grade for me. He truly is, I think, that good. And then the other one, I like him a lot too, and that's Dion Brown, Deontay Brown, excuse me. Their what is he, left guard? Yeah, their left guard. And they're all huge. All of these guys are huge, but Deontay Brown is like just built like a brick, you know what? And 6'4", 350. He's got tons of experience. He's NFL ready. And like, I don't know if he's as like, I don't want to say like stocky. It's probably the wrong term. I don't know if he's like necessarily, like, it's hard to say. Like, he's not necessarily Damian Lewis, but like that experience and everything else that he had coming out of LSU is kind of what Deontay Brown has. And I think he's had a great career for Alabama. I think he's, again, a plug and play left guard for a team. I'm excited for both Dickerson and Brown at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, they're, like you said, I mean, putting on their tape and their snap quickness is just incredible. I think Leatherwood's one of the more clean guys. And I mean, not to sound very familiar when I was talking about Devonta Smith, but like, I feel like Leatherwood's kind of that jack of all trades guy as well. Yeah. Where, he was considered as maybe, a back end first rounder, maybe a little higher than that last year. And then people kind of forget about him because you have the likes of a Penn Sewell that comes and who's, the darling of this draft, and rightly so. You got guys like Rashawn Slater, who's a guy that we both like, but he opted out. You got guys that, continue to climb like Eichenberg, and even a guy like Jenkins. You got Cosme, Darisaw for Virginia Tech, who I know you can talk about here in just a few minutes. So Leatherwood's just kind of sitting there. He's like, guys, I'm still good. But there's just other guys that are kind of sharpening their skills a little bit. But Leatherwood still, I think he's a pretty high floor guy as well. And Brown, I mean, Brown and Dickerson, they just bulldoze people, and it's so much fun to watch. And that goes to, Mac Jones's protection, Najee Harris's incredible production. It says a lot about that offensive line, and it's not surprising. But the name recognition of these guys aren't as pronounced as we've seen maybe in recent years from Alabama offensive line, but they're still every bit as good, and they're probably maybe a little more complete instead of just individualized. So really good offensive line for Alabama. Not surprising, but they definitely need to be highlighted, and hopefully the Senior Bowl week will do that.
Yeah, I think it will, especially, just being in the state of Alabama and everything else. I'm sure they'll get a lot of local love and probably a lot of love just from everywhere, because I think they're going to dominate, especially on the interior. They're probably the two best interior offensive linemen of the entire group. So, that's all I got for the Senior Bowl side. And I know you mentioned Christian Darrisaw, so I'll get in on him because I recently wrote about Darrisaw, and really I wrote about the Virginia Tech offense. I watched 2 other games, and then I watched 2 YouTube games, which the broadcast games I can't stand, but I have to do what I have to do sometimes. And I will say they are one of the more underrated offenses as far as just specific players in the country, I think, is at least in the ACC. I know Virginia Tech isn't exactly where they, as far as like a national powerhouse, they're not there. And their offensive line is certainly not Alabama's. But I'll start with, and I guess this is a Senior Bowl guy, Khalil Herbert. He was a Kansas transfer. He's 5'9", 212. He's got a thick lower body. I don't think he has the lateral quickness that you're necessarily looking for out of a true number 1 running back. He certainly takes the difficult way sometimes on a carry. He likes to try to bounce those runs to the outside, but I really think he's a nice day 3 type of back. And if he tests really well, that would be surprising to me. I don't think he has the long speed either, but again, with that thick lower body, kind of has a running style like a cannonball out of a cannon type deal. He's looking to run guys over, and there's times where he doesn't take that opportunity to run a guy over, which surprises me. But when he does, it's pretty impressive. He had a hamstring injury earlier in the season. So I think that's something to monitor during the draft process. And Raheem Blackshear, the backup to him, I think is pretty talented. I think he'll stay another year. He transferred from Rutgers. He's not the starter, and he didn't beat out Herbert, obviously, for the starting running back gig. And I think just his elusiveness and his ability to jump cut is pretty impressive. So Blackshear, maybe keep tabs on him if he does declare, but for next year especially. But the offensive line is really where I want to focus, and it's led by Christian Darrisaw. And I think when you talk about just experience for an offensive tackle, I think that's always key. Sometimes you get kind of a ball of clay and you got to mold it into what you need it to be for some players. Darrisaw, I don't think is necessarily a ball of clay, but I don't think he's got his toolbox is not necessarily the sharpest one of the bunch. And he's battled through, I think, just too many injuries for me to sit here, because I've seen some people say Darrisaw is a first-round player. I think when you look at just like from a physical perspective, yes, but the injuries are a big concern, and he's had injuries over the last couple of years. He had an ankle injury that he battled through as a freshman. He's had a nagging injury all year long with his lower body. They won't necessarily say if it's an ankle or a knee or whatever, but it's a left leg injury, and he even got hurt against Clemson, and he's missed 2 games because of it. So the injuries are the concerns, but he's played 33 games for the Hokies, and at 6'5", 314, I think he can play that left tackle spot. It would be great to see a guy like this at the Senior Bowl, just because I think he could use a week like that to really solidify himself. But he's the type of guy that, if you play him at left tackle, I think you need to have a good guard next to him. You can play him at right tackle too, but you need to have a good right guard. And there's certainly teams out there that will have that situation for him, and he could succeed tremendously because of it. But he's just one of those guys. Like the left guard next to him is Lucius Smith, and he's been just so consistent. I like his tape quite a bit too. Keep tabs on him, number 54, their left guard. He's 6'3", 320. And I'm just kind of rambling here on this offensive line because it's kind of just an underrated group that has a lot of transfers on this offense. Their center, Brock Hoffman, he transferred from Coastal Carolina. Again, I mentioned the 2 running backs. They were transfers from other universities. So you get guys like Dershaw and Lucius Smith that I think could be nice finds in this draft from Virginia Tech. So keep tabs on them. I wrote about it on cover1.net. You can go over to the website, and it's just some scouting notes on Virginia Tech. Check that out. And let me know what you think at Russ NFL Draft on Twitter. But yeah, Dershaw, just final kind of put a bow on it. I don't know if he's necessarily a first-round guy. I really don't think so. I think he's more of a second-round guy. And I think teams, that pick in that early first, that first half of the second round that didn't get a offensive tackle that need one, he would make a lot of sense for. Like, if Cody Ford went in the second round, I think there's a pretty good chance that Christian Dershaw can go in the first round, or in the second round, excuse me. So I don't know if you've watched him. I don't know where your thoughts are on with Dershaw or anything, but that's where I'm at with him. I think he could be a top 50 player, but I would be a little bit more surprised if he was in the first round than if he wasn't.
Yeah, he definitely has some buzz right now. And and I know, like you said, you see the abilities to maybe somewhat be perceived as a back end first round guy, but like you said, once you dig into a little bit of his holistically his scouting report, then you see some of those red flags come to play with injuries and maybe some other subtleties to his game that doesn't necessarily scream a first round offensive tackle. So again, though, it could be in that situation like we were talking about. You're picking in those last 8 to 10 spots, and you need an offensive tackle that you can mold into potentially a starting right tackle, left tackle for 5 years to potentially, a second contract. And I think that makes a lot of sense because I think he will be a top 50 pick of some sort. And it sounds like he might be, the back end of that first round, but I think you probably definitely make some sense of it, being one of the better offensive tackles in this class. But like I said, it's a pretty strong offensive tackle class. There's probably going to be a lot of fluidity in it starting, from week 1 of college football. You had to factor in some of those opt-outs mid-season, and then you got, playoff time, you got bowl season, then you got the college all-star games. So I think a lot of fluidity there, but Dershaw, I guess, is getting buzz at the appropriate time.
Yeah, no, and he should. Again, you put on the tape, you see some of the talent there. You see what you can see what you can mold because he can redirect guys with ease. He's incredibly strong. The length is there. He wins with his long arms. But at the same time, we talked already about this offensive tackle class, and I'm not like debating with you or anything, but I'm just kind of adding it to it. Dylan Reduns, I like a little bit more. You've got Eichenberg, you might like a little bit more. You've got Alex Leatherwood. You've got Rashawn Slater. You've got Sewell. So we're talking 5-6 guys already. Are all 5 or 6 of those guys going to go in the first round? Probably not. So who's going to be the odd man out? I think the injuries play a part for Dershaw. And if he's not healthy right now and he can't get healthy through the draft process, then I think, again, that just proves my point a little bit further. Again, you roll the dice on a guy like this, you take him, you try to mold him to what you need him to be. I think he can become that guy. I like him. I'd love to have him on the show. I'd love to talk to him and get a kind of a pinpoint idea of where he's at with these injuries. But like you mentioned, the back end of the first round, yeah, there's going to be teams that could be calling his name. Indianapolis at 23, the Jets at 25, Jacksonville at 26, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, they could very well look at a guy like that as well. So we'll see what happens. But you guys, of course, can go to cover1.net. You can get the Cover One app for free. Download the Cover One app in your app store, Google Play, wherever you get your apps for your smartphones, your devices, whatever. Search, find it, and download it. And then do me a favor. What I want to do is I'm going to put this out on Twitter. I want to get 100 reviews, 100 ratings, 100 subscribers of this podcast between now and Christmas. If we get 100 more right now, then I will go ahead and you and I will pick somebody out here on the show, and I will give somebody a free year-long premium membership to cover1.net. You can learn all your football stuff from Eric Turner, from me, from you, all the way down. You get Slack channel access, all that stuff. But we need 100 more reviews, ratings, and subscribers to the podcast. So I might be asking for a lot, but you're getting a lot out of the deal too. So do those things. Does it sound fun? Does it sound good?
Russ will also shave his head, so that was not part of it.
No, that is not going to happen. I'm
No,
going to enjoy this hair as long as I can.
no, but for real, yeah, definitely subscribed and and comment. We're not perfect. We like to sit here and jab and get into the Slack channel. Sometimes it's it can be fun, engaging, and tell us who you like and why you think we're wrong, and we'll just go at it. We like the banter, we like the commentary. Let's just have fun with it. Subscribing and can get you that access to the Slack channel, and where to find us on Twitter as well. So it's definitely a fun experience. We're not just saying this to make us look better, but we want you to enjoy this experience because frankly, that's what we do it for ourselves as a joyful hobby, but we also do it for you guys. So make our time worth your time as well.
Exactly. You said it. I can't say it any better. So find us on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft, @_ Christian Page. CP, you enjoy your weekend. Stay safe out there. And everybody else, we will talk to next week right here on Cover One, the Draft podcast.